Welcome everyone to the Monday afternoon roundtable. Got all the Monday brothers here. Tim, Jason, how you doing?
Good. Hope you are.
You both
Busy
been crazy.
week.
You both been crazy busy, right?
Yeah.
Very busy week.
What's going on?
We've had a executive protection detail. Basically, some days we're working 24 hours, wrap around. All of us have worked it, and a lot of other people that we got with us have worked it. Just basically guarding or protecting a person at their house and at work and transportation, stuff like that.
Right.
It
was a good case.
For 2 weeks.
Is an employer threat kind of situation?
HR matter.
Yeah, HR situation, disgruntled employee or ex-employee.
Yeah.
But Brianna found the case, and we've all worked it a bunch of hours.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm glad it's over.
Yeah.
This morning.
It was tough. Anyhow, today we're going to talk about a issue that's affecting law enforcement nationwide, and it's the because of the current events that have happened in the last 6 months, I guess. Really, in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
But the last 6 months have put it front and center in everybody's face with the media, and what we want to talk about is police reform. And what's going on in law enforcement today, what's going on in the community, what's going on in the media, how it's being put out there by everyone, and especially the media, but how people are perceiving it, and what we know about it. 3 law enforcement officers retired, been in the business over 100 years. What we feel about police reform, and we're going to talk about it, and it's going to be some controversy. We talked about it off the air before we went on, and hell, we got in a couple arguments about it. But it's the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act 2021-2022 is it's the HR House Bill 1280, which pretty much is a lot of directed toward law enforcement and what they need to change, how they need to change, and when they need to change. And I think it's a little strong, I guess is the word I want to use, because it's just too much too soon. And give me your thoughts when.
Or it may be too much too late.
Well, true. I agree with that too, Tim. But there's got to be a change, and we all three agreed with that. There's got to be a change in law enforcement because of what's going on and how police are interacting with the public.
Yeah, and I think we need to discuss the terminology police reform. That doesn't mean defund the police or do away with the police. And when I think of reform, I think of making it a better institution, better policing, better improving it for the police officer, the nation, and the citizens.
We've all agreed to that.
Yeah, it just some people when they hear police reform automatically close their mind and close their ears and don't want to talk. The terminology, we just got to get past certain terms.
Right, and as you two know, I serve as an expert witness in police use of force, police policy and procedures, and police pursuits. And I see it more times than not that training, officer selection, and first-line supervision are the first 3 issues that I see when I go in and review a case before I take it. And sometimes there's issues there with one of those 3, if not always all 3.
If not all 3.
Yeah, and that's sad.
I fall back on training and supervision are your 2 biggest problems we have today.
Oh, I agree with that.
And I would say, going on both of y'all's points, that the first-line supervisor is the most important person in the agency.
Absolutely, by far.
They run the agency. It's not the lieutenants, captains, chiefs, sheriffs. The first-line supervisors, you can have all the policy you want, but they're the ones that make sure it's implemented correctly.
You can have all the policy in the world. If you don't train to it and use it,
and follow
it's no good.
Exactly.
Well, they have policy and it's not policy in practice. They don't practice what the policy actually is.
Right.
And they're doing different things, and you go in and inspect the department like I do, and I see, well, you got a nice policy. It's well written. It's up to date.
Do you follow it?
They do not follow it, and more times, and a lot of times, I won't say more times than not, but sometimes that's the case. You see when you get out there and actually see what the officers are doing, they're not following the policy, and it's because, Jason, of lack of first-line supervision. We were all first-line supervisors, and if you didn't direct and control the officers' contact with the public, with their vehicle stops, with their use of force, and everything goes along with being a police officer, then you weren't doing your job.
You're right.
And I see that more and more. So, anyhow, I was looking at some stats. In 2019, 1,004 people were killed by the police. That's a lot of people, and arguably the police work is one of the hardest jobs in the world right now, because we're meeting people that they're not just leaving the church house. They're usually in a stressful situation, a situation that's dynamic, and something could happen at the drop of a hat. And they're at their wits' end sometimes. They're having mental issues. It's just all kind of controversy when the officer responds. But they've got to learn to adapt and de-escalate is the key word right there. And I think we're missing that in our training components. It may be mentioned and it may be offered in the classroom, but they're not. It's not in practice.
Well, and I was an instructor for 15 years on ASP, taser, tear gas, pepper spray, all that.
And an ASP is an expandable baton. Okay.
And we always talk use of force and the escalation of force, but we rarely talked about de-escalation of force. You could do a whole week on de-escalation of force, and it's barely even mentioned. How to de-escalate. You know how to escalate, but how do you de-escalate? And that's a learned thing, because it's not natural for a human being to get all that adrenaline and be able to de-escalate. You have to learn it. You can't just walk in there and do it. You have to know how. You have to be taught how to do it, learn how to do it, and practice how to do it.
Right. And so many younger officers, smaller officers, and I'm not knocking off the smaller guys, but they had a more issues, I think, because they had to go in and they're trying to prove themselves. De-escalation's a good thing. Get everybody calm down. Let's make this a little less than what it actually is, and let's all talk about it. But sometimes people are aggressive. More people have guns now than they did back when we were probably on the road.
Well, there's more guns in America than there are people.
Oh, that's exactly right. And more civilians have guns, and more felons still have guns. But remember, Tim, the main objective when we come on in, Jason, our main objective was to go home at the end of the shift safe.
Do what you had to do.
Yeah, and we did. We were able to respond, and we had situations. I've been sued. You've been sued. Jason's been sued. And it's because of the nature of the beast. You're in that job that things are going to happen.
Well, can I follow up on that?
Sure.
When I was in the academy in rookie school, this was a common terminology they would tell us, or common phrasing. They would say, "You're going to get sued. No matter what you do, you're going to get sued." And in a way, that put in your mind, hey, it's okay to get sued. And it's not. And all of our lawsuits we were fine in them, but you don't want to say, hey, I don't mind getting sued, because it's a bad thing. You don't want to go through that.
No, hell no.
And the second thing they stressed was anybody at any time can kill you. And they would always bring up, the guy that arrested his buddy from high school and grew up with him, and he ended up shooting him in the back of the head.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that training. That makes you understand that anybody can kill you, but you don't need to be paranoid at the same time. Does that? And that's
it does. It makes
it's
a lot
balance,
of sense.
But that requires experience and training. You can't just learn that. It takes time to get that.
Right.
Experience.
But let's talk just a minute about qualified immunity and what that means, where officers are protected from any civil litigation. They're just the nature of their job. They can't go out there. The pros of that is officers can't go out there every day and worry about getting sued. You just can't, because of the nature of the beast. And you're going to have confrontations. You're going to have contact with people at their worst time. And so that was the reason, I think, for the qualified immunity. However, I think that qualified immunity has been abused, in my opinion.
Yes.
I think that that needs to be addressed in the police reform. I think there needs to be more accountability, more transparency from the police departments when stuff happens. And I'm going to talk about Memphis for just a minute. The issue there. I think the chief of police with all the things that went wrong in that case, I think she pretty much put everything out there pretty quickly in comparison to the other departments that had issues.
And hopefully that's a she's leading the way of the future.
Hopefully.
Because so many things were kept behind closed doors, and what does that do to the media? That makes them start at everything.
Well,
I agree with that.
And the media, it can be your best friend or your worst enemy.
Well, two things. The media, if you don't give them something, they're going to make something up. I don't mean that ugly.
Not just the media, the public.
So you got to give them information. Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate on the chief on this one. That situation in Memphis,
Tyree Nichols' case is what you're
is more than just those 5 officers. It's a systematic problem. That agency, if those officers were that brazen with their body cameras on, how many other times have they done that? And two things, you have a unit called the Scorpion Unit, not very well thought out. And two, the initial press release was totally incorrect.
Right.
Now, and I'm not blaming that on the chief. She probably didn't know, I'm not sure she didn't write it. But what it does show is the chief has some issues of knowing what was going on in that department.
But that's any large department like that. That's a problem because of the hierarchy.
And that's my point is, it's systematic. It's more,
I agree. Yes, sir.
It's not just those officers. I'm not taking up for those officers at all when I say this. Not at all. But that whole agency needs to be looked at. That shows signs that this has happened before. Probably
we don't know about.
Know about it. Exactly.
Right. But when I looked at that Tyree Nichols, the body worn cameras of the officers, I was working during the Rodney King, and as was Tim, and probably you.
No, I was a senior in high school.
Oh, okay. Tim and I were working during that time, but it reminded me of that because it was so traumatic.
Egregious, yeah.
I mean, these officers, they took turns. It was like tag team wrestling when you do your wrestling podcast. It was pretty bizarre because they were just, and then they took photographs of him afterwards. I think there was more to it, like you said. I think there's a lot of history there. I think it needs to be addressed. They're going to pull up every use of force report that those officers submitted. They're going to interview people that those officers stopped or had interaction with, and they're going to build a case. And I think Memphis PD is going to pay
I think so too.
A large sum of money for this case.
Do you guys think it needs to go state by state or national?
National, by far.
I agree.
It's got to be national.
It should be across the board.
And Tim,
there's no state by state. There's too many different policies, style of living. That's where we're at.
I agree with that 100%.
So it has to be a one.
But there's
one shop stop.
There's a quick answer, and it's called the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, CALEA. It's an accrediting body that accredits police departments that mandates that policies meet law enforcement standards.
Hey, where's the problem fall there?
It's private. I can see this taking CALEA. I can see the government, federal government, state government, local government, mandating a credibility or accreditation and basically putting CALEA out of business.
Well, the George Floyd Act
even
requires that.
Or use CALEA, but the problem is on small town USA is money.
They can't afford it. That's
well,
what I'm
there's
saying.
grants. There's grants, and that's what needs to be. These police chiefs, especially small towns.
Yeah.
And we were talking to Rich last week, and he's in a small town police department.
There's more small towns than there are large cities.
Absolutely, but there's a lot of money out there, grant money, and I think this is an opportunity for CALEA where they could stand tall and say, "Here's what we need to do." They're the only game in town.
They need to be ABCD, and New York City all the way down to D to Valdez, North Carolina.
I agree.
You follow me?
I agree.
And have an ABCD team. And the price of New York City versus Valdez Police Department needs to be a big difference.
Yeah, and it's funny you say ABCD because that's how CALEA categorized police departments.
Correct.
A being the smallest and D being the largest.
Well,
I think that's how it
vice
is.
versa.
Yeah, but that's the way.
Yeah.
Because small departments,
Because money,
they have different budget
town
issues.
budgets,
Exactly.
they hurt.
Right.
Everybody's hurting.
Right.
They have different goals, different problems, different.
What do you think about, Jason, with the developmental of a national database for law enforcement?
I think it's good. And I think that's why if you did the national accreditation standard type thing, you can include the database.
True,
where
because they have certain tables and databases they have to keep up with.
I think, and CALEA also does the training academies where you have a standardized training curriculum nationwide. I mean, you can go specific on your state laws within the state, stuff like that, but you got to cover this. And part of that would be, the database. Once you become a cadet or a trainee, you go into that database as active. You can be whatever, a good one, bad one, whatever. If you get terminated, you go into this other part of where if I get fired for doing something illegal, but I'm not charged, and I move across the state or I move to another state, they can pull my name up and say, all right, this is, he was fired for use of force, not charged, but it was a criminal offense, something like that. And I think, just piggybacking on that, if you have an officer that does commit a crime, charge their ass.
I agree.
And convict their ass.
Right.
Don't give them the I'm not saying do anything that you wouldn't do to another citizen, but don't give them. If they break
should
the
have
law,
the same right as
yeah,
a regular citizen.
yeah, they should.
Especially if they abuse their powers.
Yeah, but they shouldn't have. That's just I'll let him resign, let it go away. No, pop the zit, make it known, accept it. Everybody has that.
I agree, but that opens up the door to the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights, and we're all familiar with that. And that was a good thing because officers were being brought in and accused of things sometimes that they actually didn't do because of public sentiment or because of the media outcry or for whatever reason. After a high-profile event, an officer may stop a car and may do something a little off-center. Then the next thing you know, they're in the chief's office and it's unfounded.
Yep.
But
or the DA's office.
Yeah.
Either one. Yeah.
But the best thing for that, a good officer's best friend is a body-worn camera. Because
and
protection.
why are half the cameras not
turned on
when the incident happened?
And I'm
that to me should be a termination.
I'm seeing that more and more, Tim. Where
unless it
officers
was
fail,
a malfunction, and he can.
But that's what they blame it on.
I know, but he
they're
can
not
prove
turning that camera on, either an in-car camera or body-worn camera. When they have contact with that individual, they should turn it on before. Actually, turn it on when they make the stop.
Good officer. A camera is a good officer's best friend.
Well, when I had a hot call, I would turn it on en route, and I would be talking to it. I'd be saying, all right, just got a call for a domestic assault on female in progress. They said
you're making notes.
Yeah, and that's my report.
Yep.
And plus, it protects me if I get out in a hurry and it's boom, 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 boom.
Yep.
But I've already laid out the information at real time as it's coming in.
But and we don't see it here in the South because there's no police unions. We have the Fraternal Order of Police, the law enforcement. What's the other one?
Police benevolent. Right. So, and then you have like the Troopers Association.
Yeah, but they have no bargaining power.
No.
But you go north and far south, you go to Florida and the northern states, they have a strong police union. And I've dealt with those unions, and I'm supportive. I think there should be police unions like there are in the Teamsters union and any kind of business or workforce. They need a good, strong union. I'm pro-union. But sometimes, the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights was from the police unions where they were able to try to protect the police officers, and they need protection. They do because of the times right now. But sometimes they go too far. There's got to be communications, Tim, and I think that's where we're seeing the drop of the ball.
I think the Tyree Nichols case has also brought up another point. That's a good thing. Is if you see something bad from another officer that is egregious or purposely wrong or illegal, you're obligated to report it, whether you're a police officer or any first responder.
I'm glad you brought that up.
And we have to quit turning the other way when a bad officer does something. Yes. We have to say that officer is bad. You need to do something with it. This is why they're bad. You just don't go in there and say, he's a jerk. You say this is why and show the evidence. You build a case and show it to somebody, and they need to do something.
And that's called duty to intervene, where officers need, when they're on the road and they see another officer do something that's illegal or against policy, they need to intervene. And I know you did, and you probably did as supervisors. Hey, guys, back off. That's enough.
That's enough. Let's go, yeah.
And bring them in and say, all right, I'm going to talk to you about that stop that you did last night, which I watched. And this is what you did. Or when you see an officer beating someone with a baton or pepper spraying when it was unnecessary, that's the duty to intervene. And officers got to be able, they have to have the courage. But the problem is the culture of the department, because you have these senior officers that no, you don't
tell
cross
them
that blue
senior.
line. You don't
tell
do it.
them Another officer.
And that's just how it is. All right, let's talk about use of force and chokeholds. I think that's a big issue right now, and departments are changing that to where they're going away from the chokeholds and the carotid artery where they choke an individual down. I think that's a good thing. We're seeing, where officers are. The George Floyd was a prime example where officers stood on his neck and he died as a result of those officers' actions. Of course, they were punished in the court of law, but I think that's a good start. You got any arguments there that you want to talk about?
No, I think that's a good start, and I think officers blur the lines of use of force sometimes, and you use force as a necessity to protect yourself or another person, not because you're pissed off. And you have to learn the different, you get mad when somebody pushes you or shoves you or runs from you, but you've got to learn to control that and use it in a beneficial way, not a negative way. And
but that could happen with that with that basic training.
Yeah.
It could happen in service training.
Yeah, and we talked about that off camera about training officers in the academy.
It's ongoing.
Just boxing, not to teach them how to box, but to teach them how to handle getting hit in the face,
taking a hit,
or getting thrown to the ground, or somebody getting on top of you. You've got to really simulate that to learn that. So you're not, the first time you happen, you don't, because you got officers that are going from 0 force straight to shooting somebody because they don't know how to.
How many of your young officers, Tim or Jason, had never been in a fight, have never taken a punch to the face, have never been a gun or a knife pulled on them? It's they got to be taught that.
Yeah.
All right, let's spin it a little bit. Let's talk about the bias-based issues with law enforcement. Do you think that's something that's an issue or something that should be addressed?
I think it's an issue, and what I mean by that, and let's get this terminology out there, the elephant in the room: implicit biasing and systematic racism. They're two different things. Systematic racism doesn't mean the individual officer is racist. And it doesn't mean police officers are racist, but it means the whole system, law enforcement, the judicial system, the legislative system is biased, racially. And I'll tell you, this is a fact. You got 13% of America's population is African American. So half of that is 6.5% is African American male. So there's 6.5% of America's population is African American male. Over 50% of the prison population, or prison and jail population, is African American male.
And why is that?
Because of systematic racism.
Thank you. And that's where we are right now.
Now that's just about and
but
implicit.
the regular John Doe does not know that or does not want to hear.
They don't care.
And it's not calling that individual officer a racist. That's not what it means.
No.
Well, we shouldn't even, if we're talking about prison sense, we should go further than the officer on up to the DA, the judge,
bingo.
Yeah.
all
That's the
way.
system. That's what it
Yes,
is.
the whole entire system, not just the police officer.
You're right. And the police officer and police departments and criminal justice, they get the blame where the prosecutor, the legislator, the
Are
judge
never talked about.
Never. But the officers are just doing the job that they were taught to do.
Correct.
And implicit biasing. That is not necessarily racism. It's just everybody has natural biases. Like if me being 5'9" sees a 6'3" person come in and they're drunk and weigh 300 pounds, I'm thinking I'm going to probably have to fight this person, but let's try to de-escalate it. And the guy, I'm thinking he's a big dude, but he might be not a bad dude, And I might say, all right.
What if he's a black man
Well,
and 6'3"?
That's even part of that. The implicit bias and training has showed that your mind has been through experiences and incorrect teaching has taught you to find certain things threatening.
So would your threat level in your brain go higher if he was black versus if he was white?
And be honest, when you were on the road, when you were stopping cars, how would you have handled that?
What would your
We're putting you on the spot here,
I know,
Jason.
and I'll go. I tended to work in a higher crime area or lower income, which traditionally was minorities area.
Okay.
So I stopped or interacted more with people of color, and that I enjoyed that better than working in the country club.
Right.
I developed close
Rapport with
with those people.
You know what that's called?
It's called basic police. They say community policing.
But what it is, it's old timey police.
It's right. Yeah, get rid of community policing. Get rid of that terminology. Just get away from it. It's basic policing that was taught. Get out of your damn car. Get
And
to
go
know
meet
people.
get their
talk
name.
to them.
Yes.
And those are the same people that are going to come up to your supervisor and say, "Hey, he was doing right. Old Johnny was resisting and
Yes.
fighting him, and he told him, and Johnny just didn't do what
You're
he."
exactly right.
And they will go
Especially
to bat
if
for
you
you.
if you and that person have first name
Yeah.
basis. If you, hey Jason, hey Billy.
But you remember when Tim especially, we had police uniforms, the traditional police uniforms. Now they look like a military.
Yeah.
They got their bulletproof vests, which I know they need right now, but it's on the outside of their uniforms. It's strong. It's a presence that it's not intimidating, but yet kind of intimidating.
Well, and not only that, let's look at it from an officer. If I'm in
Do
a
they
fight,
need it? Yes, they do right now. They do.
I like the internal vest because in a fight, if you're wearing an external vest, that's something bad guy can grab
Sure.
and can control you, and he can get your stuff off of your vest. He can get your pepper spray,
All
taser.
your tools.
Yeah, and then you're top heavy. If you're on the back, you're like a turtle.
I never thought of that. But
It's
you're right.
but when you're in a fight, they grab every. Like we've all had the story where you had to fight somebody naked. There's nothing to grab. It's the opposite. When you got all that stuff on there, they grab everything.
True.
And it does look intimidating. You look like a SWAT team officer getting out, and the younger officers love that. The younger officers would rather wear that than have a $10,000 a year raise. Believe it or
but
not.
that's where we are.
I know.
In policing. All right, we're going to spin the wheel a little bit. What do you think about community oversight committees on boards, on use of force boards, where they bring in civilians for the oversight to review what happened in the situation? There's a lot of pros and cons with that.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts?
I think there's several pros, but I want to give you a con.
Okay.
The traditional average citizen hears the terminology justified, and they automatically think in their mind that means that was the best choice, and that's not what that justified means. Justified means it was within legal authority and within policy. It may not have been the best thing, but we can't Monday morning quarterback that officer from that perspective. So the average citizen says, well, why is that justified? Sometimes it's ruled justified, and it looks bad, but still it was justified.
I would be more out to have each department have a 5 to 8, 10-man team in this part of the state. Now, I'm not talking New York City or L.A., but if something would happen, instead of bringing the community on, I send my guys to your department. If something bad happens, you send your guys to Jason's department. You following me?
You cross-populate.
Instead of being I know the community wants to be involved, but they don't know the law. They don't know policy. They don't know.
What about this, Tim? What about an officer from another department, someone from business, someone maybe from government, someone internally from the department? Mix it up.
Yes,
Have an attorney of some
not
sort.
have
Maybe
a
attorney.
full citizen review board. I am against that. Because
Solely just a citizen. I agree.
I do not want a citizen review board of no police force.
But the participation maybe of a civilian.
great.
I
Think of the uses of force where you've been in fights.
and we've all been in them.
They're ugly.
Sure.
They're not something the public is used to seeing. There's going to be foul language. There's going to be kicking, scratching, and they're going to see that or the video or hear the testimony, and all that sounds awful, but it was justified.
Yes.
Does that make? And they
Yes.
can't. Friend, I'll give you an example. There were 3 officers, one of me included. We caught a guy breaking into an apartment. He ran out the back door with a TV. We went to go grab him. He's an 18-year-old football star, and I'm just going to be completely honest.
You couldn't catch him.
No, he weighed about 240
He
pounds.
whipped your ass.
He beat our ass. All 3 of us. Now we won in that he went to jail, but if you reviewed that in a fight system, he won. He beat our ass. We threw the kitchen sink at him.
There's nothing wrong with that. We've all been there.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is, it looked. I mean, we were punching, we were kicking, but it was justified. And once we got him under control and handcuffed, he was fine. He was like, yeah, okay, all right, the game's over. All right, I understand.
That's right.
But to watch that, because there was video of it. It was in the public housing, and we watched the video, and I was like, we fought him for 7 minutes, and he literally beat our ass.
Which is a long fight.
And that goes into my next topic is the use of force continuum. And I think that's important. And it goes from officer presence. Once you engage with that individual, you know, what's the best way to resolve this situation? What's the best way to talk to this individual? Does he have mental issues? Is he intoxicated? Is he on some kind of drug or narcotic? How that first contact, I think, is extremely important.
The best training I've ever had on this is crisis intervention training. It's a nationwide program. It's a week long. It teaches you how to deal with people with autism, with mental health issues, with under the influence of drugs, alcohol, suicidal, anything that's odd.
Yeah, but not
It's
mentioning
not
department.
odd. It's different.
How many people in your department got to go to that training?
Everybody did
Well,
eventually.
that's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
That's
We did.
super good.
Yeah, we did, and it was because it was so good. We sent probably 5 at a time, and it teaches you how to respond in a different way. The person you're dealing with gives you clues. From those clues,
And you recognize them.
you recognize them and say, all right, this is
You
what
know
we're
how to
dealing with.
deal.
And it gives you a de-escalation. Now, sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't.
Then you go to the next
Nothing is
level.
guaranteed.
Yeah, but it gives you another tool in your toolbox.
You recognize and you respond accordingly. If, in other words, if you see that this guy is autistic, and he's having a mental breakdown, or he's out on meth, he's strung out on meth, and then you recognize those things. That creates a different response sometimes. All right, then that goes to the verbalization, the next level. It goes up.
And I would include in presence and in verbalization is your appearance.
Sure, it is. It's how you approach.
If you look professional,
And how you speak.
if you look professional in your uniform, and you're got a calm yet assertive demeanor, you're in charge, but you're not an asshole. That is what you need to do. When I was a young officer, a rookie officer, I weighed 165 pounds. I had people test me all the time. When I become a mature officer, I was heavy, so I had people run from me all the time. It was basically the way I looked, but I still had the same demeanor.
Presence is important.
It is.
And not only your uniform presence, but your physical presence, the way you conduct yourself in front of that individual, whether you're argumentative, whether your use of force is, you're going to be forceful just because of who you are. You carry a gun and a nightstick. So, okay, verbalization's the next. Okay, sir, you need to calm down. We're gonna do this, and this is how it's going to be done. Then you go to empty hand control or
Soft hands.
Open hands.
yeah, open hand. And so sometimes you have to get physical with individuals. You have to take them down. You have to place cuffs on them. You have to put hands on them, like Tim said. Then it goes to the less lethal methods, pepper spray.
Less than lethal.
Yeah,
They
less
can't-
lethal methods.
Well, they've changed the terminology.
Less than lethal.
Less than lethal,
Okay.
because it's made not to kill you, but on occasion it has
can.
killed you.
Okay.
It killed someone. So they changed the terminology on that.
Well, in other words, like if I use my, and I didn't have that when I was on, but a taser.
That's less
Say
than
I
lethal.
use a
Less than
taser
lethal.
and he has a heart condition and he dies. I get that.
Yeah.
I understand that.
Or you taser and he falls and it kills him
Right.
from a head injury.
But the officers have those tools at their disposal now. They have an aspeton, they have a taser, pepper spray, all those tools that they can use. Before they use lethal force, but sometimes it goes from shit to shy owner real quick,
Yeah.
just like that, and they can go from officer presence to lethal force.
Yeah, and that could be 100% justified.
Right. Then it goes to lethal force, where an officer has to use lethal weapon to gain control of a person or a situation. Tim's been there, you've been there, I've been there. It's just you have to do that sometimes, and deadly force is part of the job.
And think of how many times in your career that you would have been justified shooting someone, but you didn't.
You didn't because
More.
But was it your,
All three of us, and if we brought in 30 more, they would say more and more.
But was it our training that we fell back
All
on,
the above.
or
But
experience?
All the
personality,
above.
all that. Yeah.
All the
It's
above.
who we were.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah.
But now officers are sometimes trained because of that training officer that is more
The
militaristic.
field training officer.
That's right. Or more gun ho. Let's go get them. Let's kill them and let God sort them out kind of attitude. Versus, all right, officer, this is where you messed up. This is how you need to approach this situation the next time. Instead of doing this, you need to do this, this, and this. That's what we're missing right now, Jason, I think.
Yeah, and another thing in field training, and it's somewhat necessary, but you've got to change the way. When I was in field training and you worked in a high crime area, you had to develop credibility. It was the same way that the hood rats develop credibility. You know, you could not get walked. If they would try you, you had to not let them walk all over you. That's good, but don't go. There's a right mix to it, and it's hard to explain. You can stand up and assertive without being aggressive, and you've got to know. And it takes some experience and.
But there's where your field training officers should be picked at a higher level. They should be on the same level as a first line supervisor.
I agree.
Yeah.
Or
if
in
they're
that
not
ready to go
ready
up
to
to
go
that
up.
position.
And
Yes.
That's it. But if they're not, they should not be a
I agree.
FTO.
And a lot of departments agree with that, in that they give them a pay raise and they send them to first line supervisor school as part of the FTO program.
Yes.
You know.
But
Okay.
that's a start. You know?
I agree, Tim. All right, let's talk about this for a minute. And both of you, I know, we're on these things, and the special police units, like the Scorpion team, the DWI task force or the drug task force, special teams that are using unmarked cars. They were working to get into. They use it in drug interdiction. Let's talk about that.
It's like a stop. There's a term for it, and it's escaped me. But you do a stop based on a traffic violation, but it's to get into the car to look for drugs.
to get bigger and better things
Yeah.
based on a traffic
Yeah,
violation.
and we did a lot of that. But
Which
it's legal. But here's where we were good at it. You know, once you get up there and you use your experience and training, and you say, "Oh, this was just a legitimate traffic stop," you know, you run the driver's license, run for warrants, check everything's good, you know, let them go. And if you've got that suspicion, either do what you got to do or cut them loose. You know, either start writing them a ticket, get a K-9 on the way. Don't delay anything. Don't keep them there unnecessarily, because that builds tension among the person stopped, which intensifies the probability of a use of force or something wrong happening. Either get in and get out. You know, do what you got to do or cut them loose.
Do you see that law enforcement is no longer a lifetime commitment
Yeah.
by some of the new officers?
Yeah.
and that's a problem in itself.
I agree.
Like I see on Jason's note, lower retirement.
Well-
30 years is too long.
Oh, yeah.
For to be a law enforcement officer.
That's
I don't care
unique
what
to North
anybody
Carolina.
says.
Most agencies have 20 years.
I would
Most.
say
We don't.
I would
know.
say 20.
And it's because of the bargaining power, because of unions, strong unions. They demand it,
Yes.
and they got it.
It-
North Carolina doesn't have that.
It's a young man's game.
Yes.
And you get burnt out. 20-year retirement and mandatory retirement at 35 years.
I agree. I agree with that 100%.
And plus better pay, better training, better retirement, better benefits. The starting pay at a lot of places is $52,000, $53,000. Who would have ever
In this area.
Who would have thought of that, though? But it needs to be about 75, 80, 85. I think,
agree.
To get, you're going to have to. They can't get people hired right now. Every department is understaffed. Everyone.
But I think it's a cultural issue. I think it's not just the patrol officers.
No.
Again, it's those first-line supervisors. It's those
All the above.
commissioned officers in the department, the executive officers in the department, because they're not addressing issues when they occur.
And think about that grunt officer, that patrol officer, that first line officer, that you get starting in the academy all the way through your career, you get that us versus them mentality. Us versus the
Well,
bad
that's where it
guys.
is, right?
Us
Yeah.
versus society. Us versus the brass. Us versus
Media.
the city. Us versus the media. And you start saying that, you start believing it. And some of it's true. Don't get me wrong. Some of it's legitimate gripe and complain, but it overwhelms you.
If the head police of the United States come to you, David,
Police?
the head police, and say you're in charge for this change, what would be your first step?
If it were in my, if that question was asked to me,
Police reform.
I would say
What
let's
would be
go.
your first step?
I would selection, training, my policy,
That's 3.
Well, I know. All right, selection probably the first. What officers I pick, but here's the problem: there's just not a good selection to pull from. The people aren't applying like they once did.
No.
When you come on, Tim, there was probably 100 people waiting to get that job, and one was going to get it. You know, there was one opening, and there was probably 100 applicants. That's not the case anymore. There's minimal people applying for good reason. They don't want to go through all that
Jason, what
shit.
would you do if you had
I would change the academy. I would start at ground.
Training?
Yeah, right at the basic training.
But it has to be ongoing.
Yeah. It sets it builds the foundation as part of that, you know, and then you get that in field training, you get it in in-service training, you get it all through you've got officers that went 30 years that all the training they got was the basic in-service. They never went.
and what that was required yearly?
That's
and
what
that'd be it.
yeah, that's it. And they never
But
went.
how are we going to build back trust? How that's the $1 million question. How can the police?
You've got to have that community support. You've got to have government
that
support.
goes back to community policing.
Well, get away from that term, but like you said, I hate
term
that term.
is the term is killing us.
Community policing is a play pretty, a pony trick, whatever you want to call it. That's just basic policing. Teach that, get out of your car, learn the people in your community.
But that to me is where I see community policing.
Yeah.
That's old timey policing.
Basic police. That's
What
good
Know
policing.
who runs that store.
Yeah.
Know who owns it. Know who.
But then on the other side, Tim, you have defund the police. Let's cut the
Stay
police
away from
budgets.
No.
That
That
can't work
is zero.
either.
That will not work anywhere.
It'll make it
else.
100% work.
They won't. But that's where we are right now.
By building trust, we've hurt the trust so much that there's citizens in the community that are victims of crime that won't call the police.
But I think to build back trust, I think if we hold police accountable for their wrongdoings, that is the first start to showing the public we're not going to tolerate this anymore. When this police officer does wrong, we've got it on camera. We've got 20 witnesses. Act on it, charge him, take him to court.
And be transparent.
If we do not do that, we're never going to have their trust.
And I think Chief Davis did that in Memphis.
I
She
agree.
put that stuff out there quicker
soon
than
as-
any
yeah.
other department
Anybody's
has.
ever have so far.
So I praise her right now because I think there's a lot of issues with that
Yeah.
Tyree case, Tyree Nichols. But I think she recognized, all right, we screwed up. Let's put it out there. Make
owned
everybody
it,
aware.
yeah.
She did. She owned it, but the media twist it. All right, and I'm gonna ask this, Tim, and we kind of argued this topic off camera quite a bit before we come in here today in our back office. But I think politics has played a part in this.
That's the biggest problem with policing
The
today
divide,
is
the political
politics.
divide. I agree.
You got to get
gets involved.
politics out of policing.
I listened to a podcast 2 days ago, and it had a person on there that was they termed themselves a police abolitionist. They wanted to do away with the police altogether.
Sweet Jesus.
And their argument sounded, when I say this, it was presented well, but it was full of holes. It had absolutely it was unrealistic. It was living in a utopian society in a perfect world. There was no way it could happen. But they were very articulate in giving it out there. We cannot do that. We got to fund the police. We got to give more money to the problem. It's going to take more money to get over this issue that we have.
Right. And I think Congress agrees with that. The majority of Congress. There's some on both sides, so far left, so far right, that are arguing each point. Defund the police, give the police more money. Let's give them whatever they need. But you got to control and you got to have strict guidelines all the way across the board before it's going to work. It's a touchy subject, but I think we're all in favor of strong law enforcement and providing for law enforcement, giving them the tools necessary, but also giving them the training that they need. And it's going to cost money.
Yeah, it is.
That's the bottom line.
Oh, it is.
What was one of the first major police changes in our lifetime? What do y'all think it was? I'm talking major. I'm not talking you can't use
the Miranda warning come along, right? About
1966.
Yeah. And then
before that, what was before 66 that we all know? We studied it in high school, and
The civil rights movement.
in the early 60s with President Johnson. Do you know how much that changed police work in the United States of America?
But I think police were able to bring it front and center because of their inaction and their overreaction
No
to the
training.
no training and selection. because of their biases.
Back
that
to
they
all
brought.
the above.
But that's where we were at the time. We've come
But-
a long
but that-
damn way, but we haven't. We're
That's
still
true.
back in those
Right.
days
And
sometimes.
then you fall back to 1966 with the Miranda versus Arizona.
No, I
You know,
agree. Yeah.
Do we still use?
Yeah, it
we
was-
still use that Fifth
It was
Amendment?
60. No, yeah.
Do we still
yeah,
use it?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there you go again. That was in 1966.
Yeah.
But we were
It changed
constantly
every
changing.
officer
We
in
were
America.
that's what law enforcement is about. It's constantly changing, but you got to keep up with the times. And if you fall back, then you've hurt yourself. You've hurt your department. That's where leadership is important. Selection. The town councils, the state governments, the federal government. They have to put people in those leadership positions that recognize, that understand, and that can do something about it. And that's where we are right now. But this is a big topic, and I think we maybe do another episode on it later on.
Yeah, I'd like to do another one. I mean, there's so much more. We could do a whole series.
My drink's about empty, so I think it's time to move on. But I think it's been informative. I think our listeners will enjoy listening to it.
Yeah, and if you listen to this on, be sure to send us some comments, remarks about this. You know, this is
Well, I think they will.
there's going to be some things you may agree with and some you may disagree with, and that's fine. And the first step in solving a problem is admitting to a problem. The second step is talking about the problem. We've done that here.
Yeah.
So it's a,
Third step's fixing it and changing to
Or
it. You got
recognize
to
it.
adapt
Yeah.
to the change.
But you got to recognize and say, we got a problem. And
Falling
there's a
back
problem.
just up to 1966, every officer in America had to start using Miranda.
Well,
and can you imagine how that was odd?
And they're like, "What are you talking about? He can tell me." No,
well, they thought it was the worst thing in the world
They
at the
did.
time. Yes,
but
we
now-
remember that.
Now we use it every day.
I'm not trying to be. Before we go, can you pull the average officer off the street and tell me what the Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendment?
Oh, then
Don't do
I
that.
bet the less than 1% will know.
Yeah.
And I'm not knocking
No,
that,
I'm not
but it's the
either.
way there's the selection
many-
and training.
How many officers could quote the Mirandas right now?
Very few. Do you know that there's close to 700,000 police officers in the United States? I did not know that, and Jason quickly told me that, and I said, no, there's not that many, but that's how many officers we have right now throughout America. I'm
Go
sorry, go ahead.
But going back to what you said several minutes ago, the majority of the departments are 10 officers or less.
I
The
know.
vast
Yeah.
majority.
Right.
Backbone of America is that.
All right. So selection, training, placement, first line supervision,
Accountability.
accountability, partnerships within the community, political ideals, accountability, disciplinary system, and performance appraisals. I think those are issues that law enforcement's got to address if they're going to move forward and be recognized, be accepted within the community. And they got to be a mirror of the community. In other words, the percentages got to match what their population is with their police department.
With that being said, do you know the first female officer with color, what year she was hired in the United States?
I want to say 1965.
1919.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. I didn't know that. I learned something.
That shocked me.
Well,
But I'm glad it happened, and we need more. But
yeah, but most of the time they were put in a position of no authority. They
It was-
didn't give supervision.
it was during the constable days, and she was assigned to her neighborhood, which I like.
Yeah, I do too.
Basic.
But you can't do that anymore. You can't. Back to hiring, back to money, back to everything.
And again, I want our viewers to give us feedback, like you said, Jason. Let us know
and
what
share,
you think.
please.
And then there's a lot of controversy and issues with this, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done on both sides.
Just a
And
start.
until law enforcement recognizes nothing's going to happen. So again, thank you all. I appreciate you listening. Like,
Share, subscribe, comment.
Tell your friends about it. Let everybody know.
Get your friends invited to join.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you both, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks.
Thanks.
Welcome back, everyone. Monday afternoon roundtable. Last call.
Last call.
Last call. All right. What we got today, Mark? Buffalo Trace Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey that you brought. Did you bring this?
No, Tim
Tim got it. Okay, good.
I brought the stuff in
That was pretty good stuff too. All right.
That's real good.
It was. Buffalo Trace Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey is distilled, aged, and bottled at the most award-winning distillery in the world. Did you know that?
No.
Did not either. Made from finest corn, rye, and barley, malt. This whiskey is aged in new oak barrels for years in century-old warehouses until the peak of maturity. So I know, me too. The taste is rich, complex,
I'm going to remember that.
with a hint of vanilla, toffee, candied fruit. It's smooth finish, and it's light on the palate. So we're going to try it. Tim's
Sounds good.
pouring today. Yeah. We had a good podcast today.
Yeah, we did.
And I want everybody to, some people just listen to the last call because it's fun, and we enjoy it the most, but it was good. It was talking about police reform.
And we'll probably do another follow-up
We
down
will.
the road.
There'll be a lot of discussion about it, and I hope a lot of input. What are these new silver balls we have in our drinks?
I just
They're
thought of
called
something.
whiskey balls. My wife found them.
I'm not going to say it.
Tasha found them online. I think she got them on Amazon. Okay, cool. They're called, I think Tim's got the picture of the bottle.
Whiskey balls XL.
XL, extra,
Extra large.
Okay. Well, it's gonna, I
They're
don't know.
stainless steel that
gonna-
takes away from your ice melting, weakening down your drink.
They've got some type of liquid inside. You can kind of feel them sloshing around when they're
Roller.
All right, I'm going to be honest. The reason we don't have ice because we were drinking earlier today in the office, so we didn't have any ice, so we had to use these. I
on
prefer
whiskey
ice,
balls.
but we're on whiskey balls. All right, let's test this.
Got a
Okay.
smells good.
Got a little bite, Jason.
Yeah, yes, it does.
Got a little burn on the throat, the back
It's
of the
90
throat.
proof.
Yeah, it's strong. But I can taste all those flavors they talked about.
Yeah, it's pretty
Agreed.
strong.
It is strong. It's a hard. I wouldn't say strong. It's got a hard bite to it. But this is one of the Buffalo Traces. Some of our viewers wanted us to test. Said that was one of their favorites. So
Well, I like it. I've got some Buffalo Trace at home that Janice's son bought me, Tyler, for Christmas. So we'll try it next time. We'll see what it tastes like. It's a reserve, Buffalo Trace Reserve, or special blend or something like that. So we'll try it. So this is good. I like it.
It lets you know it's there.
Mm.
I think it's a little for 90 proof. It's got a hard kick to it.
It does.
Got a
It does.
buffalo kick
And you
to
know
it.
why? I think Buffalo kick. I think it's because we don't have any ice to break it down
Yeah.
like we normally do. But it's good. And all right, we're going to give it a score, Mark.
I'm going to go with about a 6.5. It's a little harsh for me.
Okay. 6.5. Tim,
I'm
put your
going
microphone up.
I'm going lower. I'm going to go to 7.5 max.
Well, that's higher than 6.5. What did you say?
I said lower. I said lower than I normally.
Okay. 7.5. Jason.
I give it a 7.5. It's not my favorite, but it's different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
I'm going to give it an 8.5. Buffalo Trace Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. I think it's good.
Yeah.
Well, I recommend it. How much? It costs $50.
68.
$68. Not bad. Not bad. So got about an average score of 8.
I think it would score higher the more you drank it. Like it's one of those that you have to. It's different than the average.
It all scores higher the more you drink.
Yeah, I know that. I know. You're right.
Yeah,
But
I like it.
I think it's different than the average ones we've been taking. They're testing. It's got a little different taste to it.
Our producer today is Tasha. She's behind the scenes, behind the camera, and she brought the silver balls. I'm not a fan, just so you know.
I think I'm going to be.
No, I'm not.
Well, if we hadn't used all our ice earlier, we'd probably be all right.
That's true. Anyhow, thank you all for listening. That's the last
Remember to
call.
share.
Monday afternoon roundtable. See you next time.
Next time.